Big game coming up involving an MVP and a guy who hopes to be an MVP, and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. We'll discuss that and more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yo, what's up? Welcome to the new Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with the help of our local experts that know your favorites like no one else. I'm the host, Tony the Barber Wiggins. That's right. Joined today by Locked On NFL expert Chris Carter. On today's show, let's go to segment 3. We're going to talk about this Thursday night matchup between the Cowboys and the Giants. We're going to hit it from both angles. It's always a very intriguing matchup. Segment 2, right in the middle, we're going to talk about Jalen Carter and the monster that he's turned into. And I knew it was going to happen on draft night when people gifted the Philadelphia Eagles. That guy is one of the best defensive tackles in the National Football League. We're going to start the show talking about Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, going up against Josh Allen, who looks like the guy who's trying to get the MVP. And then have an interesting take on who we think needs that game the most. We appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here on Locked On NFL, which is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to turn in again when you get to Locked On NFL tomorrow. Make sure you tune in for Tyler, the Madman Rowland, for more NFL coverage. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, along with all of the crossover episodes across the podcast, Locked On Podcast Network. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Chris Carter, you ready to talk some football and talk some quarterbacks?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's get to it. We're going to hear from Kevin Oestreicher, our own Kevin Oestreicher, along with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. And here's what they discussed in the crossover episode when they were talking about the matchup between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen.
This matchup to me has everything, has star quarterbacks, has great defenses, has talent on both sides of the ball. And for Buffalo, Joe, the thing that I love about Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen is the respect that both guys have for one another. We heard Josh Allen yesterday talk to the Buffalo media and was asked multiple questions about Lamar and said, quote, he's an inspiration to a lot of people in this country, talked about the resiliency he's shown, said he's really changed the way that guys play the game, but make no mistake about it, he can throw the snot out of the football. Got a lot of respect for him, a lot of love for him, and continue to talk about how both Baltimore and Buffalo's belief in both those guys have them where they are today. Two-star quarterbacks are not facing off against each other offense-defense style, but it's always fireworks when those two play.
Yeah, I mean, clear your calendar for Sunday night, even if you're not a Bills fan or a Ravens fan. This is what the NFL is about. Big-time quarterbacks, big-time stages, an important game for both teams. Obviously, the Bills looking to get to 4-0, and this is a big stretch of their schedule, 3 in a row on the road, starting in Baltimore, then they're at Houston, and they're at the Jets. So feels good to be 3-0, but you could see how things could change rather quickly. So an important game there, and then obviously things didn't go the way Baltimore wanted them to go the first 2 games of the season. Certainly had their chances against Kansas City and Vegas. And it's hard to think about Baltimore as their reigning number 1 seed in the AFC to be 1-3.
Lamar Jackson hasn't had much luck and good fortune against Patrick Mahomes, but he could go a long way in easing a lot of people's minds if he plays well against Josh Allen.
Look, I think if you're asking who needs to win more here, it's clearly Lamar Jackson right now. And this is not about trajectory. This is not about MVPs or career stakes and what everyone else is going to try to make this about. This is about the right now that the Ravens are 1-2. And if the Ravens fall to 1-3 and the Steelers on Sunday, earlier that day, they're playing the Indianapolis Colts. So I think that they should be favored a little bit more than 1.5 points against. And the Steelers win that game, the Ravens will be 3 games behind the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC North. They can't afford that. The Steelers, their schedule is supposed to get tougher in the second half of the season, but this next month and a half or so of games the Steelers have, this is the part of the season where they're going to try to build their lead. So if you're the Ravens, you have the tougher schedule because you won the division last year. You cannot afford to fall that much far behind. And oh, by the way, in the last 8 games against the Steelers, the Ravens are 1-7. So it's not like this is going to get much easier for Baltimore. They need this win, reset the track. But Lamar Jackson, I mean, he's kind of been that guy that's carried the Ravens offense for years. Josh Allen's doing what I think Lamar Jackson has done for the past several years right now. There's no superstar on the offense anymore outside of Josh Allen. There's no guy that's going to carry like the weapons the way that Stephon Diggs did in his best years with the Bills. And Josh Allen right now, despite that, is the only quarterback with more than 5 touchdown passes to not throw an interception in the NFL. He is 7 right now, the second most in the NFL. He has been on fire. He's been a great decision maker. He started off red hot. I feel like the Bills right now, they have the number 1 offense. They're averaging 37 points per game, a little bit over that right now. They have everything in their court right now, and they're in an AFC East that I think that especially with the Dolphins situation right now, they have every reason to be heavily favored. If there's a team that needs something, it's the Ravens right now, and they need a win to keep pace and not fall too much further behind in the AFC North.
Yeah, and the offensive line played better last week against Dallas, and then they almost still blew the game at the end with some crazy management of things. But I agree with you. I think Lamar Jackson needs this win for the right now more than anything else. Now, it's another quarterback situation that is like entirely too funny to me. We got all over David Tepper last week for the fiasco it appears that's going on with Bryce Young. But as it turns out, Julian Council seems to think, and he's probably right on this, that the team, the players, basically chose the quarterback. And if they go back to him after winning a game the other day, there's going to be mutiny. Listen to what Julian Council said.
It's Andy Dalton's team. And if they even tried to go back to Bryce Young, they're going to have a mutiny on their hands. The players show you who the quarterback is. Nick Saban said that before. Plenty of coaches have said that before. When it comes to quarterback competitions, we never had a quarterback competition here in Carolina the last 2 years. It was always Bryce Young. That's what Reich and his staff wanted to do. That's what Canales and his staff were brought here to do, was have Bryce Young be the quarterback. There was never a competition. But the team showed you today and throughout the week who they want to be the quarterback in Carolina. Adam Thielen showed you last Sunday who he wants to be the quarterback in Carolina. Taylor Moton, who looked at Bryce Young sideways, showed you who he wants to be his quarterback here in Carolina. The team wants Dalton.
I never thought on my bingo card I'd look and hear the words in 2024, it's Andy Dalton's team. But I absolutely agree with Julian Council. From the outside looking in, you can tell by the spirited way that those players played the other day that they made this decision.
Yeah, it's a rough situation in Carolina. We've talked about the tumultuousness there right now. But when you go in and you throw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions in Andy Dalton, and you start taking the things that are right there and available to you, and Bryce Young hasn't been doing that, you're going to win over the veterans because a lot of these guys that were there last year, and even the guys that weren't, like Deontay Johnson and Xavier Leggett, they're tired of this. They don't want to be on a losing train. Like that's the one thing that I think that people always overlook when they talk about, oh, just tank, you'll get a better pick. There's a lot of players on those teams who are like, I don't want to be part of that. I want to get me out of here. That's how you blow up, rosters. That's how you blow up teams. That's how you blow up any chance of your team really putting things together, unless you're able to survive some really bad years to get that. And it's very rare that does happen. So yeah, I mean, if the players are the one making this call, you got to stick with it. I think this is a huge momentum week for the Panthers. They're 1-2 at home. They are facing the Cincinnati Bengals. They're 4.5-point dogs at home. So this is an Andy Dalton revenge game. If Andy Dalton goes up against Joe Burrow and beats the Cincinnati Bengals to get the Panthers to 2-2, by the way, the Bengals in that situation would be 0-4. Good Lord, it would be terrible for the Bengals, but the Panthers would feel rejuvenated and there would be no going back. And it would make me wonder, what the heck do you do with Bryce Young at this point if you're the Panthers?
Yeah, and Tyler Rowland had a very interesting show yesterday on Locked On NFL. He said they ought to trade him. I don't know who's going to take him at this point because there's a lot of money still guaranteed on that rookie deal. So we'll just have to see about that. I tell you what, when you talk about guys that on draft night created drama or had drama created, Jalen Carter's name comes up, and I recall him falling to the 10th pick with the Eagles, and I was just shaking my head. And guess what? Turns out I was right. I'm going to tell you about all of that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Game Time. That's right. The Game Time app is the absolute truth, man. You can buy tickets to anything. I don't care what it is. Monster trucks, plays, comedy shows, theater, football games, all of that stuff. You can get it at Game Time, man. And Game Time is like no one else because they will never tell you that you waiting until the last minute is not an emergency on their part. You got to be kidding. That's exactly what they specialize in, those last minute deals. They will take care of you like no one else. You get the Game Time picks. They have a curation that makes it easier to save money on more sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guarantee, all of that stuff. Here's what you need to do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use this code, Locked On NFL. That's right, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'm going to spell it for you. LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Man, it's game time. All right, segment number 2, getting started here on Locked On NFL with the counselor, Chris Carter. My man sitting up there with a 3-0 NFL team and sitting up there with a 3-0 college football team. He just got all of this.
Don't sell.
Let me get it right. You got it right. 4-0, right? And I'm down here, my NFL team and my college team all combined 1-7. But that's all right, man. You know, it's always new hope, right? New hope. Jalen Carter knows a little bit about new hope because on draft night, there was a bunch of talk about maybe he wasn't the player that everybody thought he was. Yeah. Listen to my man DiBiase from up at Locked On Eagles talk about his domination so far this year.
I went back and watched some of the film from Eagles Saints, and like we all knew Jalen Carter wrecked that ball game, but he wrecked that ball game. That was like a generational Fletcher Cox against the Rams 2018, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, like prime, legendary Hall of Fame defensive tackle type of performance. Like that's Jalen Carter's ceiling. And the fact that the Eagles stole this kid in the first round of the draft 2 years ago at number 9 overall is ridiculous. And I think the coolest part is he's a villain. Like he's kind of a scumbag, but I think in the best way. Like you got to have that kind of attitude, those kind of players, especially in your defense. Last year, you were missing that kind of swag and toughness and grit. And between Jalen Carter and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Quinyon Mitchell talking trash, Darius Slay, like this defense has the energy they need. And
great take by Louis there. I always pay attention to background noise. I hope Louis got out of the way. It sounded like a truck was backing up on him. I heard that beeping. I hope he's fine today, but he's dead right about Jalen Carter, man. It looks like a generational talent. Now people are just going to expect him to do it all the time.
Yeah, I think Jalen Carter, I mean, I said it on live draft. I remember being at the combine and sitting down with our boy Q of Locked On Raiders when everyone was going, the report went out live like right before he was supposed to speak, and then he pulled away from his podium, and then he had to go handle his situation. 8 teams passed on Jalen Carter in the NFL draft, and I thought, man, like I remember sitting there thinking, like, man, the Steelers, what if they go get this guy? Because he's pretty doggone good. And when he went to the Eagles, I'm like, dang, like how could y'all let the Eagles with their nasty guys in the trenches get this dude? And he's proven to be that guy. He's a physical, athletic freak. And I like the way it's put. He's a villain. You want villains on defense. You want guys that terrorize opposing offense. You don't want nice guys. You want mean, nasty dudes. And that's one thing that Jalen Carter has. Now, on the note of being defensive MVP, I'd say, hey, let's see him do a bit more. I think he's absolutely been a game wrecker so far. But I think he hasn't sacked the quarterback yet. I think that would certainly help his case a little bit. But Jalen Carter absolutely off to a really good start to the season, and I think will be a problem in the middle of the Eagles defense for years to come.
Yep, exactly. He looks like NFC East. He looks. Well, he can play anywhere, but something about him being in Philly just seems like the absolute perfect match from a personality standpoint. And they've had some really good defensive tackles over the year. And I think if he continues with that consistency and works on that a little bit, and like you say, start to get some sacks, cut down on the personal foul penalties. He had one the other day that I really did not like. That will help people start to really see him for who he is. Now, we had a major upset last week. I got all over Sean Payton thinking that his time was up. And then he goes to a familiar place in Tampa and mollywops the Buccaneers. They got a lot of stuff that they have to work out down in Tampa. Yarko agrees with the fan, James Yarko from Locked On Bucs, that I never think like this, though, but I get him a little bit. He said they needed this loss. Let me let you hear his words.
So, it's kind of a mesh of the Lions loss and the Falcons loss from last season all rolled into one with the Denver Broncos last week. But I can't imagine that Baker and Mike and Tristan and Levante and Jordan and Chris are too happy about what just happened against a rookie quarterback in that freaking Sean Payton last week, and they're going to be motivated. I can't remember who it was that I saw on Twitter that said it, and I wish I could because they deserve credit, and I thought it was fitting. But the Bucs might have needed this before going into this tough stretch of games. They got off to a hot start, and they felt they belonged in kind of that top team tier conversation. But what I saw on Twitter that this person said is 100% right. This loss put that chip back on their shoulder.
Interesting way to look at it. I always look at losses as a negative thing that you can learn from. I guess you say this is like when your mama used to say, you can take a mess and make it a blessing. So how you feel about that? You think losses can be good?
I mean, it depends on how you respond to them. They're not good in and of themselves, but sometimes they can be a wake-up call. Sometimes they can be like, okay, we need to get ourselves together. Things are going to be – the Buccaneers certainly have been playing well. So if you look at that as like there's a lot to clean up. Yeah, but here's another thing about that is that sometimes – it's not a good sign that if you need that wake-up call, because then that means you aren't paying attention. But it's happened in the past. I've listened to, Steelers in the 70s say there were times where they came off of their second Super Bowl win and they were feeling really good about themselves, and they got slapped around one game. And they're like, oh, okay, so yeah, this isn't, we have to make sure we're locking back in. But the Buccaneers don't have that right now. Like, this isn't a team like they won a Super Bowl years ago with Tom Brady, but the way that they're kind of coming off of last year, they still have a lot to prove. And I think that if they need a wake up call right now, that would alarm me just a little bit about how they're going about things, at least when it comes to when it comes to team chemistry and how they're putting things forward. Look, and sometimes also, like, I also remind people all the time, this is the NFL. Like, teams are a lot better. The worst teams are still a lot better than a lot of people give them credit for. You look at the Panthers, everyone left them for dead. Look at the Giants, everyone left them for dead, and they find ways to beat teams last week. I wouldn't take it as a giant warning sign that the Buccaneers lost to a rookie quarterback last week, but I would take it as hey, like, they need to make sure it doesn't happen again, because that's the big thing that wins the NFL: consistency. Can you consistently show up? And when you have that inconsistent one-day performance, can you make sure that is a blip on your radar or a bump in the road instead of becoming a story for the season? And that the good teams, every team hits a bump at some time. Every team goes through a slump, goes through injuries, goes through just, hey, we had a bad day, we had a bad week. But the good teams, the great teams, they don't let it linger. They find a way to cut it off right there, cut off the problem, and keep growing back on the trajectory that you want. So, is it a good thing? Time will tell. Because if they turn it around after this and this is the wake up call, great, they use it as that. But right now, they're in the middle of answering that question.
Yep, and you just reminded me of something. I remember the old on to Cincinnati. That's all I can tell you on the
Mhm.
Cincinnati. And I think
gotta
the
do.
Patriots, I think they won the Super Bowl that year. He was like, man, we ain't worried about this. This is just something that happened. All right. Thursday night preview. We talked about the NFC East earlier. Dallas and the Giants has given us a lot of memories over the years. The Dallas Cowboys need to figure out how to block people. We're going to talk about that in segment number 3 here on Locked On NFL. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love talking about great things, man, because FanDuel is absolutely fantastic. They are great. Why are they great? Because they're America's #1 sports book, and it allows you to have a whole bunch of fun on Sunday, even when your team isn't doing real well, right? You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. All you got to do is just go to FanDuel, and when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You don't have to go from page to page. It's all right there. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. I'm going to say it again. Guaranteed $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. Just a $5 bet, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On NFL as we get ready to preview tonight's game here on Thursday. Also, we'd like to make sure we let you know that today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. All of our crossover episodes today are sponsored by Prize Picks. All you got to do, man, is go on over to Prize Picks /Locked On NFL and use the code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Chris Carter, this is going to be an interesting game. I think about the rivalry between the Cowboys and the Giants, and just when you think the Giants aren't very good, they start winning and start getting together. Peacock and Williamson discussed why they're playing better and why this might be a matchup that is very, very favorable for the Giants.
The Giants look better than the Cowboys recently, Matt. And the Cowboys, though, still on the road are favored by 5.5 points. Talk me out of the home dog pick here for the New York Giants with as bad as the Cowboys looked, especially just getting run all over last week.
Yeah, I can't talk you out of it. I mean, I really favor home dogs on Thursday night heavily. And that many points in a divisional game where these coaching staffs know each other pretty well, and, you know, a new center to deal with Dexter Lawrence, and the line I don't think is great on the edges to deal with those edge defenders, Burns and Thibodeau. And Dak might just rip these guys apart, and Lamb ends up with 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's definitely in the cards. But
yes,
Dallas is so bad against the run and has no running game whatsoever. I think that's enough for the Giants to keep this thing close, and they're coming together a little bit.
Chris, you know a lot about trench play. If you can't win the line of scrimmage, you can't win in the NFL consistently, and Dallas seems to have a problem on both sides of the ball right now.
I agree. I mean, you look at it, and you know, it's awesome what they're able to do. You know, with the passing game, as you know, they were saying, like CD Lamb, Dak Prescott, that's going to be a challenge. But you know, if they're not able to stuff the run, they're going to be in trouble. Now, here's the good thing for them: they don't got to deal with Saquon Barkley. So, like, that's the one thing, is that they're not dealing with a superstar running back. But you know, when I look at this matchup, you know, my first thing I did was like, okay, who's the, you know, where do these offenses rank? And the Cowboys offense, it's top 10. They're averaging 25.7 points per game, and you know, everything's been pretty solid there. In fact, they're number 6 right now in points scored. Meanwhile, the Giants, they're 4th from last in the NFL right now at 15 points per game. That's not good. But then you flip it around, Tony, and then you look at the defenses. The Giants, they're in the middle of the league. They're not, like, you know, doing some crazy stuff on defense. They're allowing 21.3 points per game. It's not terrible, not great. But then you look at the Cowboys, and they're 3 from last place. They're allowing 29.7 points per game, which is not supposed to be the case with this defense. And Tony, that makes for an interesting matchup. Now, you may call this a battle of the NFC East. I call this the battle of 1-2 teams who both of their only wins of the season have come against the Cleveland Browns.
Ooh.
So I look at this and I say, man, whose beatdown of that team in Cleveland was more impressive? And I got to say, in that situation, it was the Cowboys, because the Cowboys did so, and they went into Cleveland and beat them 33-17. They embarrassed the Cleveland Browns. The Giants, of course, they also went into Cleveland and beat the Cleveland Browns, but 21-15, a little bit different there. I have to lean towards the Cowboys in this. I think that they are due for a big game. They've played the Saints, who I think have been a much better team this year than anyone gave them credit for, and they've lost to the Ravens, who I think are a good football team, and they almost came back in that game. The Giants have lost to the Vikings, who right now do look like a good football team. They're playing really well, and they've lost to the Commanders, who I think are still kind of figuring themselves out with a rookie quarterback. So I'm leaning to the Cowboys. I trust them. I also, my good friend Jenna Harner, who does the Friday episodes with me on Locked On Steelers all the time. She works Channel 11, our NBC station here in Pittsburgh. She's a lifelong Giants fan, and she's the first person to put me in check whenever I start to have confidence in the New York Giants. She's like, no, Chris, don't let them fool you. This is not the time for that. So give me Dak Prescott and the Cowboys over Daniel Jones and the Giants in this matchup.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something. Two guys in Dallas to cover the Cowboys, Locked On Cowboys, Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool, they agree with you. Listen to what they said about Dallas's offense.
I am actually coming out of watching this tape a little bit encouraged by the offense, because I do think that what we've seen is that the Cowboys right now are just a lot more comfortable running a 2-minute offense, running a hurry-up offense, because that's what they've been working on the longest, right? That's day one install stuff. That's the stuff that they've been working on the longest. I think what was really encouraging for me, and this is not necessarily a Dak Prescott note, but in the fourth quarter, they ran a ton more 5-man protections, and were doing so without really being punished for it. And to me, that feels like the protection was better. The offensive line was blocking better, which I think allowed Dak more opportunities to kind of go down the field and sort of get into a rhythm a little bit, which helped him.
I think they have to get the ball out of their hands really, really quick, because Thibodeau and Burns are really, really good. They can neutralize Dexter Lawrence by admitting that they know they can't run the ball. Just don't even try. But get the ball out really, really fast. If they're running that tempo and running 2 minutes, you can wear those guys down. So the game to me is going to be won when the Dallas Cowboys are on offense and the Giants are on defense.
I agree. I think if you're able to get the Cowboys offense out of a rhythm, then you could put the Cowboys defense under pressure and you can run the ball. But if the Cowboys offense gets going, that's going to, and they build up a 14-point lead, a 21-point lead, then you're going to be in desperation mode with your Giants. Then you're going to be leaning on Daniel Jones to throw the ball a lot more. And then that's playing right into the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. So in a lot of ways, this is going to be about the Giants defense. Can you contain their big passing attack? If you can do that, I think the Giants have a chance, a puncher's chance in this game. But if CeeDee Lamb starts to go off with Dak Prescott, watch this game get out of hand fast, because then Daniel Jones will try to keep up. He'll make mistakes. The Cowboys defense will take advantage of it. And then all of a sudden, everyone's thinking like, okay, the Cowboys, they're back.
Yeah. All right. It's going to be a chance, too, for people to see a young player like Malik Neighbors, who is, I'm telling you, man.
He looks phenomenal, man.
Man, he is something else. I love this dude's game, and all of that talk about him and Marvin Harrison Jr. being sort of almost in the same neck of the woods. It looks like those people were right about that. All right, and you're right about joining us here on Locked On NFL, the new Locked On NFL. We thank you for joining us. We have 2 shows every day. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL Espresso, and then stop by the barbershop. That's where you're at right now with me, Tony Wiggins, for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Chris Carter, I know you got business to do today, counselor. So we're going to salute you and say we'll see you back next Thursday, and we'll see all of you guys back here tomorrow with Tyler Rowland here on Locked On NFL. Take care of each other, and I'll do the same.